Hi everyone, I'm really excited to have you with us today, and I'm excited to welcome back Brian Bordainick, the founder and CEO of Dinner Lab. Thanks so much for joining us, Brian.
It's my pleasure. I haven't looked at myself in a mirror, and I'm seeing myself on a Skype call, and I realized I look a little bit more homeless than usual. So
sure,
I apologize.
You don't look homeless. You don't need to worry about that. Since you've launched in 2012, Dinner Lab has expanded to 20 cities. You've done a dinner tour across the country. Now you're expanding internationally, and you're going to have your first restaurant next year. So it's safe to say it's been a busy 2 years.
It has been, yeah.
Can we start out with you telling us what Dinner Lab is?
Yeah, so Dinner Lab is it's a membership-based service, and we give chefs the opportunity to put forward menus that aren't being done in the mainstream. So these are people on the precipice of their career, and we provide more or less focus groups to give them feedback and help them iterate and figure out what concepts will work. And we do that right now by hosting a series of pop-up events in 20 cities across the United States. But always thinking of creative ways about how we can get consumers to interact with up-and-coming culinary talent.
When do you think the first restaurant will be operating next year, or is it unknown right now?
No, it's actually we're experimenting right now actually with a couple of different models about how that'll look. Some as early as December, and potentially pushing into next year. I think that we're just thinking about the sort of concept of a restaurant a little bit differently than most people, in the sense that when most people probably aren't as intimately involved with food as we are, kind of think of a restaurant model, they think of a four walls restaurant, one concept that's always in there, and then it runs forever. I think that we're trying to come at it a little bit differently and saying that we can rotate concepts through. So even if we have a four-walled structure, we can potentially rotate 12 chefs a year into that location to kind of always keep a concept fresh. So we're sort of trying to figure out right now the frequency of which we do that. Do we always have the same spot, or do we rotate the spot once a month? We're still kind of hammering out those details. And to be honest, like most things at this company, we'll probably experiment with a couple of different models and figure out what works, and then go from there. But it's always fun. It's always fun. There's
always
never
exciting at Dinner Lab.
Always.
Yeah. I mean, you guys have scaled so quickly. It really is comical. Just since last time Jenna spoke to you, it's crazy. And this can be great for the company and investors, but it's not always fun and games, of course. So operationally, how are you scaling something that puts chaos literally in the center of its business model?
It's a great question. What we have done over the last 2 years is we figured out the inefficiencies in the model. What are the bottlenecks? What's the most challenging? And then we worked really hard to simplify that. So that is, in essence, when we look at sort of what's worked and what hasn't. That's been a huge thing for us, which is basically saying, okay, look, we know that when we go into a new location that getting membership base up and running and getting the kitchen leased out and all these other things can be huge snafus and roadblocks for us. So we basically remove those inefficiencies from the model as much as humanly possible, which has given us the ability to scale a lot quicker than we were initially anticipating. There still are problems, and it's still not a perfect sort of solution, but we are able to sort of add more markets on without having to add too much stress. It's always stressful, but not too much.
Yeah, I mean, how about personally? How are you staying focused and energized?
We have a really unique company in the sense that I have a lot of business partners, actually 4 others besides myself, and that is really stressful at times. You have a lot of cooks in the kitchen, no pun intended. But what's been really cool is as the company has grown and some of these lanes have gotten more defined, it's been really great to have people that you trust running certain aspects of the business. So when I look at, in essence, my day-to-day as CEO of a company, it's actually not as crazy as you would think. It's working with people and really making sure that we're strategically heading in the direction that I want to head, and also that the brand and things like that are really in line. But at the end of the day, we have people running specific verticals within the company. So we have the pop-up operation. We have a brand new project in New York that we're working on with the city of New York. And then we have, some stuff that we're experimenting with television and production out on the West Coast. So I have sort of each one of my business partners running different aspects of the business. And at the end of the day, it's really just on making sure everyone's aware of where we're going and checking in with them more than anything else. So for me, it's it's a lot of information. It can be information overload, but sort of recognizing that you only get to hang on to, one or two things, and really driving that home. And as a CEO, I think you're there to make sure you hire well, and you keep the company culture and the vision. But on the day-to-day execution of how things are getting done, you'd go crazy. And you have to have people you trust. And I think for me, that's really freed me up to just have a lot more, energy to stay at the high level, which most CEOs is like, that's where we like to be, when we start getting into the details of everything. And, I also recognize I'm not the best executor. I'm not the best manager of people. So, really hiring your weaknesses has been huge for us.
Entrepreneur did a really great article on you, Brian, that had to do about that exactly, when it becomes information overload. There's a time that you were balancing your work and education and Dinner Lab and literally flying to New York and to New Orleans in the same night. So for anybody, that's just too much.
Yeah.
Why is entrepreneurship worth it for you, that you took a step back and thought, hey, let me realign my values a little bit and take some time for myself so I can make sure I keep Dinner Lab going?
Yeah, so that's a great question. What I got my start professionally teaching, and I was definitely a huge bleeding heart liberal, and I still kind of am. But it was, for me, it was a huge opportunity to really sink my teeth into something that I believed in. That's always been sort of operating at the core of like who I am as a person. And I had a really hard time when I first started my career of anyone who did anything other than like helping out humanity in a very direct, tangible way of having their hands dirty. It was really hard for me to like relate to people. I was like, oh, you're a jerk. You're just like after money, or you're after this or that. I think that as Dinner Lab has grown, as the concept is starting to turn a corner of sorts, and it's looking like we could potentially be onto something really big here. I've derived so much energy out of, hiring people and giving people the opportunity to sort of create wealth, and not in the sense that everyone can buy fancy cars, but giving people the opportunity to pay their rent and to also, be working on something that everyone really believes in. That's just, I've been really fortunate my whole career to be in that world, but I can't imagine doing anything else, and to be surrounded by people who do that. That's the huge thing. And it's, doing that from New Orleans, again, if we were fortunate enough to have some type of liquidation event, and we have 40 or so and 50 employees down here in New Orleans, and all of a sudden you have our employees who have some cash in their pocket to potentially invest in new ideas, and that then their friends are coming to them, and more companies are being started in New Orleans, and that for me would have a paramount, just like a ridiculous effect on the city. You look at a city like Austin, Texas, and the reason why Austin is because of Dell. I mean, sure, there's all sorts of other reasons, but Dell had a huge cash out event, and all of a sudden people in technology started moving there, and other people started coming in, and now it's this hub of entrepreneurship and things of that nature. And it's like, to be able to do something like that in a city like New Orleans would be a ton of fun. And even if it's not necessarily in New Orleans, just to be able to do that with other people that I really care about, it's something that means more to me than seeing our, ringing the bell on the New York Stock Exchange. Like, sure, that'd be fun and probably make my parents really happy, but like at the end of the day, like, that's not what it's about. It's about doing something that can create lasting value for a lot of people, and have a fundamental impact on people's lives. And what cooler than that? So when I hit walls or things like that, I think initially I put so much of that pressure on myself to figure it all out and to be the person who's like, I have every answer, and I don't. So I think this is a bit of a rant, but one of my favorite things is there's looking at how Abraham Lincoln sort of ran the presidency, and looking at how JFK ran the presidency, and it's a really interesting sort of thing to look at. And I try to model somewhere in between the two. By no means am I putting myself anywhere near those two names, but Lincoln surrounded himself with people who hated each other and were all really smart and all fought, and then he would just sit back and listen to the chaos. And Kennedy surrounded himself with really smart people who brought him the best information, and then he ultimately made every decision. He was like, bring me the best information out there, and I'm going to make the call. And I think somewhere in the middle of those two models are something that I really try to sit in the middle of, and that's how I've like sort of maintained balance and things like that. Is just recognizing, like, especially as this company grows, like, I'm not the smartest person like to do this. Like, there probably are people who are naturally more intelligent or better managers or things like that. So the great thing is that we can hire them. So that's sort of the long and short of it.
Brian, the funny thing that you brought up, well, actually, it's not funny, but I tend to go through like every 6 months a quarter life crisis, which apparently is typical for 20-year-olds. But how are you okay with not knowing the outcome and not knowing the right answer to questions? Because I like to think I'm in with, let me be in a state of flow and figure it out, but I don't think I am.
Yeah, I think that's, it certainly is a tough one, but I've learned this at so many different parts of points of my career, is that like once it's actually figured out, it's actually quite boring. So like once we have a system for doing X, it's like, okay, that works. Now let's maybe tweak it a little bit. But the fun part for me is actually the process. It's not necessarily going through it. So like I actually derive a lot of energy or joy out of figuring out really difficult questions and working through the mess of it and screwing it up once or twice. Like that's just where I like to play. I just have a lot more fun, and it's not it's not for everybody, and it certainly has taken me a while to get to that point, but I have a lot of fun in like new challenges and saying, okay, let's try to figure this out. But I also have sort of hit peace with the fact that it's no matter whether we spend a week trying to figure it out or 6 months, like we're still going to mess it up. So, you can get really frustrated about it. But the only thing that really frustrates me is messing it up twice. I hate when we make the same mistake like more than once, and that just pisses me off more than anything. I think about running a business is like you're going to mess up everything that you touch, and anyone who tells you differently is either tooting their own horn or a lot smarter than I am. It's just like the biggest thing is like if you can be honest and open about what you don't know, those are the things that you're testing. Those are the things that are the fun parts of the business, like what's going to work, what's going to resonate with people, and fortunate for us, more so than a software company per se, is that we can mess up. Our whole business is predicated off of experimentation and messing around and having fun and seeing what works and what doesn't work. I mean, that's what we do. So and people are paying us to do that. So it sort of permeates every aspect of the business.
Yeah, you guys would be a great case study for the lean startup if Eric were to write a new book.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so in our last episode, you shared that 75% of your repeat customers were coming from word of mouth. Well, just any customers, actually. But now that's obviously not the case because you're getting tons of press. So how are you utilizing that?
Yeah, so, I mean, at the end of the day, someone, providing a great experience for someone and giving them easy vehicles to share information is always going to be a huge driver of future business for us. I think the companies who really get this, and that's always the case, right? Like Tom's Shoes, sure, they're a huge brand now, but they got this from the get-go. Zappos got this from the get-go. Like you treat people really well and you put out an amazing product and people are going to want to talk about it. People want to share those experiences. As it comes to like media and press and things like that, we haven't invested a ton of money into marketing, probably no more than it's in, your or my bank account, total in marketing. And, as we move forward and enter into a different phase of the business, we've always, again, the same thing. We've never released a press release. We do everything, our earned media is really earned media. And we like to keep it that way. The people who want to write about us, the ones who want to write about us. And we cultivate those relationships, and those certainly do have a huge impact on memberships and people just coming to the site. But at the end of the day, we're still trying to figure out, we got from point A to point B, but that is not going to be sort of the skill or what's going to get us from B to C. And I think we recognize that. And we're experimenting with a couple of different ideas for marketing, whether they're more like grassroots awareness campaigns, potentially like Facebook AdWords or something like that. But I don't think that we have necessarily the solution. But I think what we do recognize is that like there are distinct lifebloods of a company, and we're certainly past sort of that initial phase of like, oh my God, is the concept going to work? And now it's like, okay, the concept kind of works. Let's figure out how to get it into more people's hands. And that's sort of just where we're sitting as a company right now. And I wish I had the answers to it. But again, that's sort of the fun is we're going to figure that out over the next couple months.
I know another part of raising awareness for you, especially for you as your role on the team, is going to venture capital meetings and raising money for Dinner Lab, which is difficult because not a lot of people want to invest in restaurants because of the high risk. What's the one thing that you've learned founders should not do when they're working with investors?
Change your model based on what people say are avenues that you should go down. At the end of the day, it's your business. Obviously, you should take advice about what financial models work and what don't work. But I think where people make a mistake is if you believe in a future state of the world and you believe you have a sound plan to get there, you're going to be able to attract people to that idea as long as you're making progress towards it. So, I mean, like what we're talking about is preposterous, and it's hard for people to wrap their heads around. And when you're dealing with, more old school venture capital type of money, they're very risk averse. It's I want to see a model that's worked, and then let's do it 3 more times. That's sort of an easier sell than, some of the earlier first kind of people through the wall. And for us, we believe in making progress towards our goals, and we've attracted people along the way as we've gone. I think for anyone, make sure what you're talking about certainly makes sense and makes financial sense, and try to have as clear of an understanding of how much cash it's going to take to get you to where you need to go. But to say that, like, oh my God, you need venture capital dollars in order to have a successful startup company is just not accurate at all. And there are a number of alternative ways to raise funding. I mean, we've raised over $3 million, and we have one institutional investor, and now we're starting to think through sort of like the next phase of the business. And different players to bring to the table. But, we have a pretty clear vision of where we want to go. And I think before you even sort of open up that Pandora's box, you better have a very clear sense of what you want to do, because they're going to, people have different thoughts. And that's part of being an entrepreneur, is that you're going to sit down with 10 very successful, people, and they're going to give you 10 different pieces of advice. And that's that's one of the craziest parts of being an entrepreneur. You're like, oh my God, it's not like you're getting it from like your friend or whatever. You're getting it from people who have exited large companies, and they're saying, this is the path that I would take if I were you. And then someone else is saying, I would do the exact opposite. And they're also, exited a large company. You're like, oh my God, like, how do you parse through that information? And I think really having a strong foundation of what you want to do, and then you're able to extract sort of nuggets from each person. But if you're just sort of floundering, like, this is not the right business for you to be in as an entrepreneur. Like, you're going to wind up running around in circles and not really making much progress. Like, if you're going to be wrong, be really wrong,
I like it. And I want to shift gears for a second, Brian, and talk about the culture as the company grows. You said in a video, employees first, customers second, and that really stood out to me. As the company grows, how are you maintaining that close-knit culture?
A company that drinks together stays together. Well, we joke about it, but it is serious. Our employees feel a huge sense of ownership over the company, and there are ways as a company that you can actually directly incentivize that. We're getting ready to issue out stock to employees. That's a huge way to do that, but that's sort of more incremental. I think it really gets down to what you're trying to do, and as a sort of owner of a company, you don't get to hang on to too many things. And I think we really value opinions. And one of my favorite things about our company is that we don't really hold back. We're not a feel-good culture of every idea is a great idea. We just don't believe in that. But we try not to shoot down other people's ideas unless you have a better one to present. And I think that creates a really honest and open culture. And what's great is I feel very confident that everyone at this company is saying, there's no like behind the scenes politics, the type of stuff that happens when you start reaching 50 employees. Like, if someone has a problem, they're going to come up and tell you that, and we're going to work through it. And I think, we're fortunate that feedback is such an integral part of who we are as a company, but we use it at every aspect of the business. Top down, people are very comfortable. We have open floor seating, there's a ping pong table, behind me over there. But like, that's all, those are all things that, aren't really that important. It's really about a feeling and something that you work really hard to create, which is like, that starts at the top and it works all the way down. And like, I love our employees. They're great people, and they work extremely hard, and they care about this company a lot. And if you always are hiring people, we always joke, we say you hire people that are gritty, passionate, and smart, and everything else is teachable. Like, if you're willing to work hard and you're smart, and you have a passion for this space, like, you can learn how to do ops. Like, you can learn how to do pretty much everything. But those three are sort of the intangibles that we just surround ourselves with people who may be older or younger, but they all share those three things.
So, what do you look for in people that you're bringing on the team?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have we've made a number of mistakes in hiring, just like most startup companies have. One of the things that we really believe in is having projects at every aspect of the business. So people can look great on paper. We've actually learned that we don't really care about paper too much. Like, resumes are important, sure, but we try to provide a small test, if you will, that is a real life example of what work would be with a really condensed schedule. And see what their output looks like. And if people tend to make excuses like, oh, hey, I got bit, it's like, this isn't going to work. And we know that. And that measures sort of that grit component to it. Like, what do you do with really tough deadlines to meet? Are you passionate about this? Like, what happens when, the normal things that work at people who work at a startup company have to deal with all the time that people who work in the, real world don't have to deal with. But, I can't explain to someone really what it feels like to work on a project for 20 hours and then have it get ripped apart and never see the light of day. That's something that if you work at a startup company, that just happens. And it happens often. And for people who work in very structured environments, that doesn't happen. But when you're moving and iterating as rapidly as a startup, it's inevitable that that's going to happen. So I think that, really looking for people who are passionate, who care, who give a damn about what they're doing, and they're gritty, and they're willing to sort of figure out creative solutions, and they're smart. We're at a point now where we really, really do need extremely smart people. So those are really the only three things that I think are important.
No, so I mean, you have the word of these people though, so how do you actually test them?
Yeah, so we give a real life example. It's my HR person is she's on the phone with a candidate behind me now, pacing back and forth. But one of the things that we had her do was, map out, a hiring plan for two different markets, one international, one not, and asked her to work through the entire recruitment strategy. I mean, it's probably 20 hours of work. And we wanted to see what the output would look like. And we're big believers of saying, this is what your job would be. If you want this job, then go ahead and show us what you would do. And then if you do it well, we just usually say, our first step after hiring is say, go execute the plan you just created. So
very cool.
Yeah, it's and it weeds out a lot of people. A lot of people are like, I'm not going to do this for a job I'm just applying for. And we're like, well, then you're probably not the right fit to work here anyway. So those are, and they're all specific to the job. So the one that we had for HR is totally different than the one that we have for our event managers, which is totally different than the one that we have for our chefs. And, those are all, we just have made a lot of mistakes hiring. And the best way to not make that mistake is just to say, hey, look, this is a different company than you're probably used to, and this is what the work is like. So, hey, if you went through this whole process and you didn't like what you just did, you probably shouldn't apply for this job because that's what you're going to be doing. So a lot of that is sort of transparency that we just try to be honest and open and create, not like ridiculous conditions, but that's like literally what they would be doing. So I don't know if that's a great way to do it.
It's an awesome way to do it.
Yeah, we found a lot of success with it.
How about interns?
So interns are my favorite thing. Most of our customer support team started out as interns. Some of our oldest employees started out as interns. It's a great way for us to, again, see what people are like, work with them, have them around the office, see if they enjoy the culture. And that's been a really, really, really big piece for us. We have a decentralized intern program in each of the local markets where people are helping out with space curation that want to join our event team. And then each sort of department has interns that are kind of cycling through, and it's been really cool for us. And we always, to be honest, we wind up hiring internally all the time. I mean, think about it. Someone who wants to, work for free for a period of time and learn the ropes of the business, and if they do well, it's like,
why not?
Yeah, this makes sense. So yeah, it's like you've already seen under the hood of the car. You're not going to be shocked by anything. If you've been in the office for the last 3 months, there's only 30 of us in here, and we all sit on the floor together. So it's not like you're gonna, be shocked by anything. So that's been a great tool for us as well.
Do the interns have the same test before they're hired?
Some do, some don't. We always do some type of. It'll be a little bit lower stakes usually, but yeah, we definitely. That's just sort of a top-down kind of norm. Like, if you're going to come work here, we're going to see what you're made of before you walk in the door.
No pressure there.
No, none. I mean, it's not even like it's not even necessarily to have. It's sort of like when Bain or BCG or one of those like big four consulting companies, they ask like how many ping pong balls can you fit on an airplane. The actual number doesn't actually matter at all. It's really the thought process that goes into it, and it's very similar to us for us.
No, All right, so now you guys are starting another 10-week tour with 12-course meals. Where is it starting and where are you going?
So we have each of them starting in a different area of the country. We think
Naturally.
we figured out, yeah, we think we figured out sort of the cheapest flight pattern. So we're trying to work through that. But no, I mean they'll basically go through and we'll collect the feedback again and then try to get to that next step of really figuring out, where we're going to put this place and sort of what the mechanics are, and then working on business planning, location scouting for restaurants. I mean, it's a lot of work on these chefs right now. So it's, it's just a lot of fun to really, the first sort of tour was seeing who can cook and in what degree. And this is really now starting to flesh out an actual menu concept that could be used.
How long does it actually take you to plan that tour?
It's actually, the planning of the tour is a little much, but it's actually not that bad. It's a lot of demand-driven stuff. So, I mean, we have them sort of blocked off for almost a week per location. And, if take a market like New York where they want to book 6 days worth of events out of 7, then the chef will cook 6 days out of 7. And if it's in one of our newer markets like St. Louis, we'll do like 2 days. So it's really, that part of it is not too terrible, believe it or not. I mean, the logistics under the hood of it are hard, but that's what we've worked really hard to figure out over the last couple of months, like what it takes to get a chef from point A to point B, and then executing an event and then moving forward. And while that's difficult, it's sort of what we've had to do for the last 2 years.
So you're used to it now?
Getting there.
Brian, I want to close with something that sounds cliche, but I really want to know. Everything you've created with Dinner Lab is about stories. When you look back on your journey creating it, what do you want your story to be?
Wow, man, that's a really good question, and it is definitely something that I believe in more so than anything. And it's actually funny. I don't know if I've ever really articulated that anywhere, but a lot of people have said you guys really believe that the narrative is really important, that it belongs in sort of everything, and any brand that I've ever had my hand in helping create, it has been hugely important. For me personally, I really just at the end of the day want to, the narrative of the story is that we created something from nothing in an obscure place, and brought a lot of value to the table, both not only for at every aspect of the chain, both for our customers, for our staff, and for the producers, the people who help produce events and are part of that community. And at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be a win-lose situation. I like to think that if we're successful at our job, we can, create wealth for investors, create a ton of opportunity and value for our staff, give opportunity to our chefs and people in our network, and then keep our customers happy. And I'm sure someone loses, right? Because that's just sort of the yin and yang of the universe. But at least in our chain, everyone that we touch doesn't. And then that would be a really awesome narrative for me. We
Sounds like a plan.
just got to do it.
Yeah, I'll keep on you to do that.
I appreciate that.
Can we end with you just telling our viewers how they can check out Dinner Lab and see if it's in their city and sign up?
Yeah, so people can go to dinnerlab.com and check out our website. It'll show all the cities that we're in. Most of our newer cities have memberships open. Some of the older cities don't, but you can get on a wait list, and we clear those. We invite people off of those periodically. Also, if you love good food pictures and pictures of really interesting stuff, our Instagram account, which is just Dinner Lab, is a great way to sort of interact with who we are. And we have really funny social media people who usually reply hilariously to comments. So it's a great way to sort of keep up with what we're doing and who we are.
Perfect. As always, it's a pleasure to have you, Brian. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, guys.